Hello viewers, welcome to my channel Online Biology Tutorials. In this live of today, I will be reading the chapter 12 Ecosystem taken from NCERT Bio. So in case you are interested in hearing the audio of first 11 chapters, they are in the same playlist, and such type of audios of the chapter always helps you in finding out have you understood all the terms or you still require some understanding. So in case your eyes are tired, these audios are helpful and it is a must suggested for your board examination, CUET and NEET. Stay connected till the end. This chapter also has a good weightage and you might get questions on the numericals because 10% law comes in this, food web comes in this, productivity units are also very important, decomposition process, its steps, and what are the factors that leads to decomposition makes this chapter a very important one. So without further ado, let's begin with the live reading of chapter number 12 Ecosystem taken from NCERT of class 12 biology. An ecosystem can be visualized as a fundamental unit of nature where living organisms interact among themselves and also with the surrounding physical environment. Ecosystem varies greatly in size from the small pond to a large forest or a sea. Many ecologists regard the entire biosphere as a global ecosystem, as a composite of all local ecosystems on Earth. Since this system is too much big and complex to be studied at one time, it is convenient to divide it into two basic categories, namely terrestrial and aquatic. Forest, grassland, and desert are some examples of terrestrial ecosystems. Pond, lake, wetland, river, estuary are some examples of aquatic ecosystems. Crop fields and an aquarium may also be considered as man-made ecosystems. We will first look at the structure of the ecosystem in order to appreciate the input, productivity, transfer of energy in the form of food chain, food web, nutrient cycling, and the output, degradation, and energy loss. We will also look at the relationships, cycles, chains, webs that are created as a result of these energy flows within the system and their interrelationship. So let's begin with the main part of the chapter and its component ecosystem. Ecosystem structure and function. In earlier classes, you have looked at the various components of the ecosystem, including the environment, which includes the factors like abiotic, which are non-living, and biotic, which are living. You studied how the individual biotic and abiotic factors affected each other and their surrounding. Let us look at these components in a more integrated manner and see how the flow of energy takes place within these components of the ecosystem. Interaction of biotic and abiotic components result in a physical structure that is characteristic for each type of ecosystem. Identification and enumeration of plant and animal species of an ecosystem gives its species composition. Vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels is called stratification. For example, trees occupy top vertical strata or layer of a forest, shrubs the second, and herbs and grasses occupy the bottom layers. The components of the ecosystem are seen to function as a unit when you consider the following aspects. So the following are the aspects: productivity, decomposition, energy flow, and nutrient cycling. To understand the ethos of an aquatic ecosystem, let us take a small pond as an example. This is fairly a self-sustainable unit and rather simple example that explain even the complex interactions that exist in an aquatic ecosystem. A pond is a shallow water body in which all the above mentioned four basic components of an ecosystem are well exhibited. The abiotic component is the water with all the dissolved inorganic and organic substances and the rich soil deposit at the bottom of the pond. The solar input, the type or the cycle of temperature, the day length, and other climatic conditions regulate the rate of function of the entire pond. The autotrophic components includes the phytoplankton, some algae, and the floating, submerged, and marginal plants found at the edges. The consumers are represented by the zooplankton, the free swimming and bottom dwelling forms. The decomposers are the fungi, bacteria, and the flagellates, especially abundant in the bottom of the pond. This system performs all the functions of any ecosystem and of the biosphere as a whole. That is, conversion of inorganic into organic material with the help of radiant energy of the sun by the autotrophs. Consumption of the autotrophs by heterotrophs, decomposition and mineralization of the dead matter to release them back for reuse by the autotrophs. These events are repeated over and over again. There is unidirectional movement of energy towards the higher tropic levels and its dissipation and loss as heat to the environment. First very important component of ecosystem is productivity. Let's go ahead with it. A constant input of solar energy is the basic requirement for any ecosystem to function and sustain. Primary production is defined as the amount of biomass or organic matter produced per unit area over a time period by plants during photosynthesis. It is expressed in terms of weight, which could be in per gram square, or energy in terms of kilocalorie per meter square. The rate of biomass production is called productivity. It is expressed in terms of per gram square per year or kilocalorie per meter square per year. To compare the productivity of different ecosystems, it can be divided into gross primary productivity or GPP and net primary productivity or NPP. Gross primary productivity of an ecosystem is the rate of production of organic matter during photosynthesis. A considerable amount of GPP is utilized by plants in respiration. GPP minus respiration losses, which is R, gives you net primary productivity or NPP. That is why GPP minus R will be equal to NPP. Net primary productivity is the available biomass for the consumption to heterotrophs, which includes herbivores and decomposers. Secondary productivity is defined as a rate of formation of new organic matter by the consumers. Primary productivity depends on the plant species inhabiting a particular area. It also depends on a variety of environmental factors, availability of nutrients, and photosynthetic capacity of plants. Therefore, it varies in different types of ecosystems. The annual net primary productivity of the whole biosphere is approximately 170 billion tons dry weight of organic matter. Of this, despite occupying about 70% of the surface, the productivity of the oceans only 55 billion tons. Rest of course is on land. Discuss the main reason for the low productivity of ocean with your teacher. Next step is decomposition. The steps of decomposition are very important and has been asked from this chapter n number of times. So read this part very well. You may have heard of the earthworm being referred to as the farmer's friend. This is so because they help in the breakdown of complex organic matter as well as in loosening of the soil. Similarly, decomposers break down complex organic matter into inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, water, and nutrients, and the process is called decomposition. Dead plant remains such as leaves, bark, flowers, and dead remains of animals, including fecal matter, constitute detritus, which is the raw material for decomposition. The important steps in the process of decomposition are fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification, and mineralization. Detritivores, which includes earthworm, break down detritus into smaller particles. This process is called fragmentation. By the process of leaching, water-soluble inorganic nutrients go down into the soil horizon and get precipitated as unavailable salts. Bacterial and fungal enzymes degrade detritus into simpler inorganic substances, and this process is known as catabolism. It is important to note that the above steps in decomposition operate simultaneously on the detritus. Humification and mineralization occur during decomposition in the soil. Humification leads to accumulation of a dark colored amorphous substance called humus that is highly resistant to microbial action and undergoes decomposition at an extremely slow rate. Being colloidal in nature, it serves as a reservoir of nutrients. The humus is further degraded by some microbes, and release of inorganic nutrients occur by the process known as mineralization. Decomposition is a largely oxygen requiring process. The rate of decomposition is controlled by chemical composition of detritus and climatic factors. In a particular climatic condition, decomposition rate is slower if the detritus is rich in lignin and chitin, and quicker if the detritus is rich in nitrogen and water soluble substances like sugars. Temperature and soil moisture are the major important climatic factors that regulate decomposition through their effects on the activities of soil microbes. Warm and moist environment favor decomposition, whereas low temperature and anabiosis inhibit decomposition, resulting in build-up of organic materials. This paragraph, starting from decomposition to materials, is very important for competency based questions. Next topic is energy flow. Except for the deep sea hydrothermal ecosystem, sun is the only source of energy for all the ecosystems on earth. Of the incident solar radiations, less than 50% of it is photosynthetically active radiation, which is PAR. We know that plants and photosynthetic bacteria autotrophs fix sun's radiant energy to make food from simple inorganic materials. Plants capture only 2 to 10% of the power, and this small amount of energy sustains the entire living world. So it is very important to know how the solar energy captured by the plants flows through different organisms of an ecosystem. All organisms for their food on producers, either directly or indirectly. So you find unidirectional flow of energy from the sun to producers and then to consumers. Is this in keeping with the first law of thermodynamics? Further, ecosystems are not exempt from the second law of thermodynamics. They need a constant supply of energy to synthesize the molecules they require to counteract the universal tendency towards the increasing disorderliness. The green plant in the ecosystem are called producers. In a terrestrial ecosystem, major producers are herbaceous and woody plants. Likewise, producers in an aquatic ecosystem are various species like phytoplankton, algae, and higher plants. You have read about the food chains and webs that exist in nature, starting from the plants or producers. Food chains, or rather webs, are formed such that an animal feeds on a plant or on another animal and in turn is food for another. The chain or web is formed because of this interdependency. No energy that is trapped into an organism remains in it forever. The energy trapped by the producer hence is either passed on to a consumer or the organism dies. Death of an organism is the beginning of the detritus food chain or food web. All animals depend on plants directly or indirectly for their food needs. They are hence called consumers and also heterotrophs. If they feed on the producers, the plant, they are called as primary consumers, and if the animals eat other animals which in turn eat the plants or they produce, they are called secondary consumers. Likewise, you could have tertiary consumers too. Obviously, the primary consumers will be herbivores. Some common herbivores are insect, birds, mammals in terrestrial ecosystem and mollusks in the aquatic ecosystem. The consumers that feed on these herbivores are carnivores, or more correctly primary carnivores, though secondary consumers. Those animals that depend on the primary carnivores for food are labeled as secondary carnivores. A simple grazing food chain or GFC is depicted below. It starts with grass as a producer, then energy goes into the goat as a primary consumer, then to the plant, man, which is secondary consumer. The detritus food chain or DFC begins with the dead organic matter. It is made up of decomposers, which are heterotrophic organisms, mainly fungi and bacteria. They meet their energy and nutrient requirements by degrading dead organic matter or detritus. These are also known as saprotrophs. Sapro means to decompose. Decomposers secrete digestive enzymes that break down dead and waste materials into simple inorganic materials which are subsequently absorbed by them. In an aquatic ecosystem, GFC is the major conduit of energy flow. As against this, in a terrestrial ecosystem, a much larger fraction of energy flows from detritus food chain than through the grazing food chain. Detritus food chain may be connected with the grazing food chain at some level. Some of the organisms of DFC are prey to the GFC animals. And in a natural ecosystem, some animals like cockroaches, crows, etc., are omnivores. These natural interconnection of the food chain makes the food web. How would you classify human beings? Organisms occupy a place in the natural surroundings or in a community according to their feeding relationship with their organisms. Based on the source of their nutrition or food, organisms occupy a specific place in the food chain that is known as trophic level. Producers belong to the first trophic level, herbivores are primary consumers to the second, and carnivores to the third, being secondary consumer. The important point to note is that the amount of energy decreases at successive trophic levels. When any organism dies, it is converted to detritus or dead biomass that serves as an energy source for the decomposers. Organisms at each trophic level depend on those at the lower trophic level for their energy demands. Each trophic level has a certain mass of living matter at a particular time called as the standing crop. The standing crop is measured as a mass of living organisms or biomass or the number in a unit area. Just prepare one question of differentiate between the standing crop and standing state. This is one question not being answered well by the students. It can come in 2 marks from this chapter. The biomass of a species is expressed in terms of fresh or dry weight. Measurement of biomass in terms of dry weight is more accurate. Why? The number of trophic levels in the grazing food chain is restricted as the transfer of energy follows 10% law. Only 10% of the energy is transferred to each trophic level from the lower trophic level. In nature, it is possible to have many levels, producer, herbivore, primary carnivore, secondary carnivore in a grazing food chain. Do you think that there is any such limitation in a detritus food chain? Next topic, and very important for competency, ecological pyramids. You may be familiar with the shape of the pyramid. The base of the pyramid is always broad and it narrows towards the apex. One gets a similar shape whether you express the food or energy relationship between organisms at different trophic levels. This relationship is expressed in terms of number, biomass, or energy. The base of each pyramid represents the producers or the first trophic level, while the apex represents the tertiary or the top consumer. The 3 types of ecological pyramids that are usually studied are pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass, pyramid of energy, and these are being given underneath. When I will do the one short diagram revision of this chapter, at that time I will explain all the pyramids as well. So stay connected. Every day I'm doing lives. In case you want me to intimate you through a post, you can write me in the chat and I will definitely post it prior to my live in the post. Any calculations of energy content, biomass or numbers has to include all organisms at that trophic level. No generalizations we make will be true if we take only a few organisms at any trophic level into account. Also, a given organism may occupy more than one trophic level simultaneously. One must remember that the trophic level represents a functional level, not a species as such. A given species may occupy more than one trophic level in the same ecosystem at the same time. For example, a sparrow is a primary consumer when it eats seeds, fruits, peas, and a secondary consumer when it eats insects and worms. Can you work out how many trophic levels human beings function at in a food chain? In many ecosystems, all the pyramids of number of energy of biomass are upright. That is, producers are more in number and biomass than the herbivores, and the herbivores are more in number and the biomass than the carnivores. Also, energy at a lower trophic level is always more than at a higher level. There are exceptions to this generalization. If you were to count the number of insects feeding on a big tree, what kind of pyramid would you get? Now add an estimate of the number of small birds depending on the insects, as also the number of larger birds eating the smaller. Draw the shape you would get. The pyramid of biomass in sea is generally inverted because the biomass of fishes far exceeds that of phytoplankton. Isn't that a paradox? How do you explain this? Pyramid of energy is always upright and can never be inverted because when energy flows from a particular trophic level to the next trophic level, some energy is always lost as heat at each step. Each bar in the energy pyramid indicates the amount of energy present at each trophic level in a given time or annually per unit area. However, there are certain limitations of ecological pyramids, such as it does not take into account the same species belonging to two or more trophic levels. It assumes a simple food chain, something that almost never exists in nature. It does not accommodate a food web. Moreover, saprophytes are not given any place in ecological pyramids, even though they play a very vital role in the ecosystem. And I think you know the answer to it because a similar question was taught to you in science of grade 10 and it was a mandatory subject at that point of time. So with this we are done with the reading of chapter 12 ecosystem taken from NCERT. In case you are interested in hearing the audio of first 12 chapters, you can visit the same playlist. All the videos are being uploaded and they are public. In case this video was helpful to you and somehow it helped, then do share it with your friends so that they can also revise in this innovative way. Such type of revision is quite helpful for both CUET and your NEET examination. Stay connected so that we can have a reading together of the last chapter of biology, biodiversity and its conservation. Stay connected.